Thank you, Tanveer. Thank you to the organizers for calling me. Like many other speakers before me, I'm not a direct student of Professor Oommen. And when we were young and we were just discussing with Susan, who was my class friend, we were very scared of him. And we kept our distance. And even when I joined as a colleague, I would sort of think many times before I would knock the door, and if I didn't hear, come in, I wouldn't dare open the door and go in, So there was a sense of fear, sense of distance. What we were struck by is the care he took for his classes. So he would come completely prepared, very well structured. We had different styles in our center, equally attractive. And when we were young, we didn't find the structuring too attractive, and as I grow older, I find that increasingly I say firstly, secondly, thirdly, and I have many points because it helps you to put your ideas and your thoughts in control. When we were younger, we were, and here Abhijit is not here, we would often say, and he in particular would be extremely wary of the little slips which would be put up on the door of the faculty. He was very particular about the tutorials. As students, the tutorial timings were very important. Whatever it would be, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, and it would be 2:30 to 3:45, or things like that. And Abhijit would say, "But why does he want it quite like this? 2:30, we've just had lunch. I mean, do we have to go back now?" But the point is, you realize I give these examples because he thought things through. He thought things through, and he had it's not that he just wrote on professions, but he lived a life dictated by certain rules, procedures, norms. He just didn't say it, he practiced it, And the other thing, because like I said, I didn't even think ever of approaching him as a supervisor. There were these three big people in our departments. I stayed clear of them. But it's the point that he noticed you, which I discovered many, many years later. And when I joined as a colleague, and it was very intimidating to sit with people like him in the faculty meeting. And years went by, and I didn't seem to be doing too much writing. And he would say, "Why don't you write? You should sit and write. You should write. You should publish." And I would tell him, "But I have nothing to publish. I have no idea to publish, no reason to write. I mean, I can't think of anything that I have to write." And he didn't say that's absurd. He kept quiet, and he said, "That's called a fallow period." And so I sort of took that seriously, and I've often thought of, and I find myself repeating to my students that this is fallow period. I mean, things will come, you keep reading, you keep writing, you keep doing what you have to do. And it was interesting when you're talking about Professor Mukherjee mentioned about questions of nation, state, nationality. And I personally, not because of being historian, even as a sociologist, I'm not too comfortable with the definition questions of what constitutes a nation, But the point is that in the discipline of sociology, who did you have writing on state, citizenship, civil society, nationalism, nationality, questions of international order, globalization? So in a certain sense, he sort of created spaces. And if you look at comparative writings on sociology across the globe, these are themes on which people write today. But it was something which was missing. Social movements, understood in a particular kind of fashion. But to go back to more smaller details of our encounter, I've already told you about the distance that at that point, if you must remember, at that point we had just joined in MA, and he was probably barely 40 or early 40s, so he must have had to put in a lot of, to give that sense of gravitas, and which kept people like us in some distance. But one thing I remembered very carefully, we already had Mr. Phillips talking about going to Muradabad the next day, that this was one late night, Rajni may be remembering, there was a water shortage, or may not be remembering. We all marched to his house, banging on empty buckets because there was no water. And we were wondering what will happen next, and he appears on the terrace of his house with a pipe and addressing out. And the first thing was there was an instant silence because the image was so film-like, the evocation of him standing, people shouting there, and he's standing and looking at people down there, like, what do these people say, He used to smoke a pipe at that time, it was always there. And then the interesting thing is that he would have this aura of authority, but he was essentially democratic. It took a little bit of time for me to realize that, because he would be talking to you, he would be listening to you, he wanted to know, what was happening around. He had a genuine interest. The other thing which I think many of people have talked about is his institutional building. And I'm so glad that Professor Rajaram mentioned that we wouldn't have had the office that we have, the Indian Sociological Society, had he not got the money, invested in the money. And now that my term is over, I have to say that he would call me up and say that you're very selfish, you better stand up for the presidentship of the Indian Sociological Society. You have time, you have retired, what are you doing, And finally, the tragedy for me was that when the elections got over, he had his first stroke. And I wanted to share the news with him. So I called up his mobile phone, and his daughter-in-law picked up and said, Daddy's had a stroke, he's in the ICU, but he wants to know what happened. Okay, that kind of engagement. I was just talking to Geetha when I was coming, and culturally we are taught we should disengage as the years go by. Well, he was no one to disengage. He was in the middle of it all. And so I said, sir, I just wanted to tell you that I won. Good. But like Mr. Phillips said, by how many votes? So I don't even remember very clearly. So I said, and then he was not impressed. He said, shame on you. So that sort of firmly put me in place. I sort of tried to keep up a lot about institution building. And unfortunately, the only 2 times I met him after the stroke were not happy times. I was not happy with the kind of vulnerability from the time that he was standing on top of the terrace to this person who didn't want to be like that. So I wrote a long letter to him saying what we were trying to do from research committees, thematic lectures, archives, and they read it out to him because he would like to have a sense of what did you promise, what did you do? And I think that is something incredible. He was not very sympathetic to people if you just taught, if you just wrote, and if you didn't do a little more than that. So his public commitment, he didn't use words like public sociology, but he was. They all were. We were just talking about the others who have left us, like Professor Bethe or Professor Oommen. They had a role in bringing the university and society together, however you understand that relationship. There was a deep commitment, and they thought through ideas. The other thing that struck one, as I thought of him the last many days, is like a good scholar and an academic, he grew over the years. So from the time when I first heard him lecturing to the time when I heard him as a colleague and after, there was continuous growth in the way he articulated, in the themes that he chose, in the topics that he engaged with, And I think I liked Tanveer's question that it was not overt, his politics, but I think in certain senses he was, because he wrote about it, wrote about a university where the other centers of the School of Social Sciences were broadly left-wing, informed of a Marxist perspective, and sociology wasn't. In the 1970s, that's a story I would tell quite differently. I was an outlier in that center, in that sense of the term. But I also, as the years went by, understood, and particularly in the current context, why institutions have to be carefully nurtured, why plural ideas have to be engaged with, diverse views to be encouraged, teaching to be taken seriously. And the point that I learned from him, and I think JNU gave us this opportunity, and I know many of my younger colleagues over here don't get that opportunity, that we had time. We had time to teach, and we had time to think, and we had time to write. So we were, in a certain sense, privileged to institution builders like him and others who created the conditions to make that possible, and that our research fed into our teaching, and our teaching fed into our research. And he thought these things deeply about questions of ideology, questions of politics, but like I said, the language or he expressed it could be different. There are many more, everybody knows about his sense of humor, and we were a little scared about it because you never knew where it was coming from and what would happen to you next. But a person extraordinarily warm, affectionate, and loving, contrary to my first impression of that person standing on the terrace with the pipe, looking down upon us, So I am really, really happy to be here, and I know that he lives on not just because of his writings, but because he has shaped institutions which would be carrying on those legacies, even if muted at this point of time. Thank you.